Welcome to Finding Avalon, the podcast that amplifies disabled voices. I'm your host, Jenna, a disability inclusion advocate, communicator, and storyteller. This is a place where disabled folks correct the narrative by sharing authentic lived experiences. Join me as we explore life with disability through our lens, because representation matters. Welcome to another episode of Finding Avalon. Thanks for supporting this labor of love, one-woman production that elevates authentic disabled representation, one story at a time. This time around, we're featuring a very special guest from New York City, Jenniva. Jenniva is an intuitive guide, content creator, and spiritual entrepreneur known for her authentic presence on TikTok, where over 75,000 followers tune in for insights on spirituality, astrology, healing, and self-discovery. She blends relatable wisdom with cosmic guidance to empower others, especially late diagnosed and neurodivergent souls, to embrace their truth and inner gifts. She's a first-generation Jamaican American and lives with autism and ADHD, or ADHD. Beyond her thought leadership on social media, Jenniva also channels her spirituality into soulful music and creative ventures. Welcome, Jenniva.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Oh, it's so wonderful to have you on the show, and especially interesting for me personally to hear the perspectives of another ADHDer. Shall we jump right in?
Yes, let's get to it.
Jenniva, can you share a little bit about your disability journey and the advocacy work you do?
So, my journey with neurodivergence it's been a process of unlearning, rediscovering, and just stepping into my truth. You know, like many late diagnosed people, I've spent most of my life feeling like I was too much or not enough, too sensitive, too intense, too inconsistent, but
Oh, yes.
never quite fitting into the mold of what society expected. And I always knew that I saw and I felt the world differently, but I didn't have the language to describe it. So it wasn't until my late diagnosis that everything finally clicked. As a creative, my neurodivergence, it's a gift and it's also a challenge. And this is why I'm so vulnerable on my social media and just trying to make people feel heard and understood, because I know what it's like for us to constantly be misunderstood in this world. You know, it's really great when it's great, and when it's not, it is not.
Mm-hmm.
I thrive, when I'm deep in my passions and my projects and I'm hyper focused, like it's amazing. But then there's times when I struggle with executive functioning and overstimulation and burnout. So through my content, I've been able to advocate for others who have felt unseen and misunderstood. And my goal really is to just spread awareness and offer validation to the community, because I feel like a lot of us never really had that. And even you would think in 2025, it'll be a little different, but we still face a lot of the same struggles. And because so many of us have gone through life thinking something was wrong with us, I like to basically just let people know, like, listen, it's nothing wrong with us. It's the system. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I like to offer that reassurance to my followers that it's not you, it's them. You think
Yeah.
it's you, but it's them.
Yeah, and authenticity is such a huge piece of that, and it takes a lot of vulnerability to step into your authentic self and show other people that it is safe to be yourself, and
hmm
that these spaces that have told us for so long that we're flawed and we need to assimilate, those
hmm
are harmful systems that are not telling the truth, right?
Right.
And I really commend you on the work that you're doing around that.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, my advocacy is deeply tied to authenticity and healing. So whether that's, through my music or social media content, my goal is just to help people feel less alone and have discussions that challenge outdated narratives. I want to create spaces where neurodivergent individuals, especially those who are spiritually inclined, can feel safe to explore their identity without shame.
Hmm.
It is a calling, and I think that's also something that has come with the process of not only being late diagnosed, but just unmasking and just realizing like, okay, this is who I actually am. This is what I'm actually supposed to be doing. Okay,
Yeah.
I get it now, you know?
Yeah. And you think about all of the time and the energy that we have expended trying to push ourselves into a mold that wasn't ever going to fit, that organically doesn't fit.
Hmm. Yeah.
And and that it's really not a one size fits all society. Capitalism tells us it is. Patriarchy tells us that it is,
Right.
and ableism tells us that it is. But that's not
Hmm.
true. And I'm glad that you're showing people another way of being. So, Geneva, as a society, we're now starting to realize that autism and ADHD often go hand in hand. Some people experience it separately, but in recent years, research and understanding has grown, and we now know that there's a significant overlap between autism and ADHD. Research suggests that 50 to 70% of autistic people also meet the criteria for ADHD, and similarly, two-thirds of ADHDers may also have autism. When I was finally able to access my assessment, I was expecting the outcome to be autism because of my deep knowing and my experience being aligned with those traits growing up. What I didn't expect, though, was the ADHD outcome until deeper in the process when I realized how many traits that I actually did have that I had chalked up to what I thought was normal based on the environment I was raised in. So that really opened my eyes because I was having conflicting experiences of needing structure but wanting
Hmm.
spontaneity, or
Hmm.
sensory overwhelm and wanting calm and total silence. But sometimes I was sensory seeking and craving adrenaline. And then I would be straightforward and hate small talk, but somehow also be a super friendly, curious person. And of course, a lifetime of masking only helped confuse matters for me. So, Geneva, I wanted to ask you, as someone who goes through life with this same desire for authenticity and living with that push and pull that is ADHD, what have your personal revelations been?
One of the biggest revelations I've had is realizing that so many of the contradictions that I experience aren't necessarily contradictions. It's just the way that my brain is wired. And I think that that has allowed me to give myself so much more grace because having both really it can drive you up the wall.
Yes.
It really can drive you up the wall and you're like, yo, what is wrong with me? Because, it's like there's days where I need structure, but then sometimes the structure can get a little boring and I need
Totally.
to be spontaneous. Then
Yeah.
there's some days when, I'm very introverted, but then I kind of want to be an extrovert and go out and talk to people and meet people, but then I don't like people at the same time. So it's like, so
Ah,
it doesn't
but
really
it's
make
it's
sense.
it's so true, though. I've heard people say the expression that both things can be true at the same time, and I think that
Yeah,
applies to the ADHD
it really does.
experience.
It,
Yeah.
it really does. I realize that, I exist in between, constantly shifting between these states, and it really depends on my energy and my
Mhm.
environment. And I'm learning it's okay. Like, it's
Yeah.
okay. There are some days where, I may need to create some structure, and then there's days where I completely resist it because I don't want to, and that's also fine. There's times when I really hate small talk and I don't want to speak to anyone, and then there's other times when I might be curious about people and, I want to spark a conversation, and I'm just learning to just take it easy, be gracious with myself, and, like, just depend on how I feel that day, how my energy flows that day. But I'm just not being hard on myself. It's good that I now have the language to understand what it is that my brain is going through so I don't feel like a crazy person.
Mhm. Yeah.
So I'm just learning to like flow with it instead of working against it, basically.
Yeah, and giving ourselves grace sometimes can feel harder to do. I can give other people loads and loads of grace, maybe even more grace than they deserve, but yet when it comes to me, I'm just expecting, something
Hmm.
completely different, just being harder on myself than I need to.
Yeah, if there's anything that my therapist has embedded in my brain, is to be gracious with myself. There's
Mhm.
so many factors that come to play when we talk about how we feel having ADHD. On top of being a woman,
Mhm.
our cycles, once I hit my luteal phase, I'm a completely different person. Like,
Yep.
like I don't want to talk to anyone. The executive dysfunction gets so real, so it's just like
Yeah.
all of those things kind of come into play. And I'm just learning to just be gracious with myself. Like, okay, this is how I feel today, and this is how I'm going to move. And that's it.
Yeah. I love you bringing in the part about cycles because
Hmm.
we also have to contend with cycles and hormones and all of
Hmm.
the energy drain or energy surge that can come with
And
that.
we're
And
more likely to experience PMDD, which isn't talked
yes,
about enough. And
yes,
that also kind of made me, like 10 times more gracious with myself because I'm like, okay, I didn't even know there was a correlation with
yeah.
ADHD and PMDD. And it's just
I,
so much.
I just learned that literally about a month ago. I always had a suspicion in my mind that, okay, well, surely it's got to have some impact. And I was reading some research paper and all the bells went off in my head like, oh,
Yeah.
so instead of totally berating myself and feeling so much shame for having intense emotional reactions during a certain period,
Hmm.
now I know there's there's real science. There's real science behind this.
Yeah. And I really wish that the healthcare system cared more, because I feel like a lot of our issues get dismissed.
Mhm.
Um, Especially for someone like me. I also have PCOS, and that's
Okay.
basically a hormonal imbalance. So dealing with the PCOS and the ADHD and the
Oh,
PMDD
yeah.
and it's just like now that I know all of this, I can work better with myself.
Yeah.
I know, like, okay, I'm at this part of my cycle. Let me give myself some rest. Let
Yeah.
me not do too much, or I'm going to burn out.
That's
Like
right.
it's just, now that I know and I have the language for it, it's so much easier to just make my life work for me.
Mhm. And I think it's also so empowering to have these conversations one-on-one or within groups, or even if you're doing it in your social media content or your writing, whatever it is. These are things that we need to be talking about because they are real and they impact our lives constantly.
Hmm. They
And
do.
when you have the odds stacked against you with a different neurotype in a world that doesn't always appreciate people whose light shines differently, right?
Hmm.
And right, let's just put it that way.
Yeah.
But then also you have like the health related impacts as well. Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. I'm so glad you did.
Yeah.
Geneva, I feel like your work opens up a portal for people to feel comforted and safe to consider their identity and knowing that their souls are not broken or wrong, and
Hmm.
to explore the undeniable connection between these things. How does that realization shape the way that you interact with other people who might be navigating their own way through late discovered neurodivergence and self discovery?
So, in terms of interacting with others, I try to create a space, well, mostly on TikTok. I'm trying to create a space where people feel safe enough to unmask and just explore who they really are. I know firsthand how exhausting it is to live under the layers of societal conditioning and programming and constantly feeling like you need to shrink yourself just to be palatable to
Hmm.
the others.
Hmm. Hmm.
Okay, so
Yeah.
my message is always, you were never broken. It's the system. The problem is the systems that made you feel like you had to hide. So the more we unlearn shame and let go of who we thought we had to be, the closer we get to who we've always been underneath it all. And that's really what I try to advocate through my content, and just allowing people to feel seen, because I definitely understand. So it's just for us to have the confidence in ourselves and unlearn and unmask and just essentially just not care. Just
Hmm.
not care. Like, just be bold in who you are, and just not care about what society thinks or how they feel.
Hmm. Because really, they can't give us the validation that we need. Anyway,
No,
I feel like that has to come from within and from feeling self-actualized and feeling our true selves.
right, exactly.
So, we've talked about how a person's spiritual awakening often coincides with, or perhaps even is, actually your neurodivergence and your true self that's emerging. Can you talk a bit about the strong correlation you notice between waking up spiritually and being late diagnosed as neurodivergent?
So for me, these two experiences are deeply intertwined, and I don't think it's a coincidence that so many late diagnosed neurodivergent people are also experiencing a spiritual awakening. For me, it started with the spiritual awakening first. And then later on, I came into finding out that I'm neurodivergent. When you spent your whole life masking and performing to survive, and then finally discovering the truth about your mind, it feels like waking up from a dream,
Hmm.
that you didn't even know you were in. It's like it's a process of just like peeling back the layers and realizing you've been conditioned to see yourself through a very distorted lens. And this is what I tell people all the time when it comes to spiritual awakening: it kind of never ends. I just
Hmm.
feel like me coming into the knowing of my neurodivergence is another layer of like my spiritual awakening. I'm like, oh wow, okay, now I'm going deeper because I didn't even know this was a thing.
Hmm.
Like,
Yeah, it's like, am I still on the ride? Is
you know, um, and many neurodivergent people I've been really focusing on like the way that they both kind of intertwine. Like, many neurodivergent people are highly sensitive, emotionally, energetically, spiritually, and we pick up on things that other people miss. We see through illusions. We feel deeply connected to the unseen. And yet we live in a world that basically tells us to suppress these gifts, to be
Hmm.
normal, to
Hmm.
conform, and then this is why we end up in burnout. This is why we
Yeah.
end up depressed. This is why we end up exhausted and even disassociating, because you can't deal with the reality. It's too much,
Hmm.
and when you've spent your whole life in survival mode, your light, it starts to dim.
Hmm. You're suppressed. It's like bottling of emotions, but instead it's bottling emotions and self.
Mm-hmm.
And
Absolutely.
how can that not be harmful? How can that not have results like depression, self-harm,
Mm-hmm.
alienation, burnout, loneliness? And
Right.
yeah, how can we expect to smother a person and say, "Why aren't you smiling and breathing just like all of us?"
Exactly. Honestly, I believe that the world benefits from keeping neurodivergent people disconnected. They do.
Mhm. Mhm.
Disconnected from ourselves, from our creativity, from our spiritual awareness, because the systems that we live under, it wasn't built for free thinkers. It wasn't built for people who challenge norms, for people who sense energy and just see through all the facades, and that's why self-discovery, whether through a neurodivergent or a spiritual lens, is so powerful, because it's like a reclamation of yourself. It's breaking free from survival mode and just finally stepping into a reality that aligns with who you've always been.
Mhm. Absolutely. I love this conversation. There's so much there's so much we could talk about. We could do you know what? We could do a whole podcast, like an entire series on these topics. I really appreciate the depth of your understanding and your ability to really speak it because often neurodivergent folks have difficulty recognizing the emotions that they feel
Hmm.
or like me it takes me a very long time to process my emotions. So
Yes.
I'm great in an emergency. I can get everything, I can compartmentalize, get everything done, do unthinkable things, and it can take me years or even a lifetime to process something that
Hmm.
probably deeply wounded my core, right?
Yeah.
And being able to have the language and share the way that you're sharing, I think is going to make a lot of listeners really reflect on this for quite a while. I know it is going to do that for me. So thank you for that.
No problem. And you know what? There really are no rules. And I tell people this all the time, especially when it comes to like being a content creator, because you have people who will try to sell you a course and tell you like this is what you need to do
Yeah.
to grow your following and to go
Yeah.
viral and post 3 times a day and no, there's sometimes I don't post for a whole week
Yeah.
and it's all right. You know why? Because I think now that we are in what they consider the age of Aquarius, Aquarius energy is about authenticity. And I think collectively, everyone is craving authenticity. So you're going to see the rise of more creators who are just like you and me, who are normal people like that. You know, like
Mhm.
I think people are kind of tired of the lifestyle content and,
Mhm.
everything just being perfect and
Yeah.
pretty. And, you know, people want to find others that they can relate to.
Mhm.
And I think the more of us that step up and just keep it real, the more that will be normalized.
Mhm. And that's a big reason why I started this podcast. I had planned to start it a few years ago, but I ended up becoming quite ill and had to put it on the back burner for a little while. And I kept wanting to get back to it, but I had to prioritize my health at the time,
Mm-hmm.
still do. But finally, I just said, I have to do it. We need to have authentic representation, authentic voices for people who are neurodivergent, people who live with chronic illnesses, people who live with other disabilities,
Mm-hmm.
because there are so many of us and so many stories to be told and so many voices that have historically been not listened to or suppressed. And
Mm-hmm.
so I feel like it's our time.
I do think it's our time. And I think, if anything, a lot of us are starting to see there's more of us than we thought,
Mhm.
because I think we spend so much of our lives kind of feeling alone and feeling like an outcast, not only with society, but just with our family, with friends. You know, it's very hard to find other people that you relate to. But the more that we get on these platforms and start speaking, it's like, oh, there's a whole lot more people out there that's just like me. Oh, wow.
Mhm.
you know?
Yeah, and social media in a great way can create and connect these kinds of communities, and that's what you're doing with your TikTok.
Yeah, I'm glad that I've been able to kind of shift a little bit and just allow people to be seen and heard.
Mhm. Yeah, and you have such an approachable, straight up way of communicating that I think that it is something that we're not used to seeing because of all the capital I influencer types who speak.
Yeah,
They have their own way of speaking and they say a whole lot of words that mean nothing, and it's
yeah.
it's all image, and it's to me very inane. I find it maddening. I can't handle it at all. If you saw me scrolling on my phone, I'm just like, nope, no, I don't want to hear from you today. Nope.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I've always kind of just approached things just being myself.
Yeah.
Not really, I'm not trying to be anyone else. And I always say this, when you are yourself, you will draw in the right people, So it's like, yeah, I might not be palatable to everyone.
Mhm.
I even I even like lost a friendship over how I was showing up on social media.
Mhm.
because
Yeah.
I had a friend who thought I was just doing way too much, and she was like, brands aren't going to want to work with you, and I'm like, I don't give a fuck about no damn brands, like,
Yeah.
like,
That's not what you're doing. That's not
that's
what you're here
that's
for.
not what I'm in this for. Like, if it comes, it comes, but like, I'm not doing this for that reason. And it
Yeah.
just made me realize how many people are just so fake.
Yes.
So- they're so
Yeah,
fake.
and you find out who's really aligned to who you are and how accepting they really are of what matters to you, because capitalism and ableism go hand in
Hmm.
hand, and they
Hmm.
love to squash down anything that is not palatable to them or useful and productive for them, right? And a
Right.
lot of people drink that Kool-Aid. And it's true, even people we care about can have
Hmm.
these views and these biases that end up separating us sometimes.
Yeah. And, I'm a firm believer that you will find your tribe as long as you are authentic. Because when you're authentic, you naturally will filter out who's meant for you and who's not. So you find that once you get to that point of unmasking and really being yourself, it might make a few people uncomfortable, but those aren't the people that you need in your life. They can get the
Mhm.
fuck up out of here.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. If I'm too much, go and find less.
exactly. And you'll find your tribe. Like, I still can't believe that I even grew my platform as quickly as I did, simply showing up as myself. And
Yeah.
that was just like validation for me.
Yeah.
Like, that's all I need to do is to show up as myself. The right people will find me. They'll resonate with the
Yeah.
message,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. Absolutely. You'll have people gravitating your way simply because of who you really are.
And
And
that's what I encourage everyone to
mhm.
do. Everyone who's been like diagnosed, take the mask off. Take it off because we're all here, but we can't find each other if we're all wearing the mask. So we have to take it off.
Mhm. Yeah, how do we know who our community is if we're hiding behind the masks? Even if we don't choose those masks and they've been
Right.
forced on us, I think it's super important to start dismantling it.
Exactly.
Mhm. Geneva, what is a common misconception about disability in your experience, and how do you think we can work to change that narrative?
Um, One of the biggest misconceptions is that neurodivergence is just a list of like deficits and struggle. So often people assume that if you have ADHD or autism, you're either like hyperactive and unfocused, or you're socially awkward, or you're incapable. But neurodivergence is not just about a set of problems. It's a completely different way of experiencing the world. Like, there's this ingrained belief in society that neurotypical ways of thinking, learning, and functioning are superior. And that bugs me because I'm like, a lot of
Mhm.
times it doesn't even make sense. I think to a lot of us, it doesn't make sense. A lot of
No,
what they do does not make sense.
no.
And they look at us, they look at neurodivergence like it's something that needs to be fixed. So, I've been using my platform basically to shift that perspective. What if we started viewing neurodivergent brains just as simply different with their own unique strengths? Instead of forcing people to fit into a system that wasn't built for them, we need to build systems that actually work for all types of brains. So that
Mhm.
means rethinking education, rethinking work environments, and even just social expectations, like to accommodate different ways of thinking and being. It's 2025. Like, what are we doing here?
Mhm.
So
Yeah. Yeah, if not now, when?
yeah, like, what are we really doing here? So
Yeah.
we change the narrative by making space for neurodivergent voices, by challenging ableist assumptions, and recognizing that disability, it does not mean less than, it just means different.
I love what you said about making things accessible for all different neurotypes, right? Because that's a big part of accessibility. It's not just obviously wheelchair ramps and universal design spaces so everyone can physically access.
Mm-hmm.
What about our interpersonal and social interactions, whether that's in community, in professional spaces? The unfair expectation of performing neurotypicality instead of being yourself. I realized this recently. We are always accommodating neurotypicals
Yeah.
and always changing ourselves, whether we're successful or not,
Mm-hmm.
to their liking. We are trying to adapt, but I don't see that adaptation coming from the other side. And that's a huge part of the core of ableism as well, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep. And, I that's why I'm kind of like pushing for us to change that, because why are we doing that still?
Mm, yeah,
It's in, like I said before, we're in the age of Aquarius. It's the age of authenticity,
yeah.
so the best thing we can do for ourselves is to be ourselves, and you will naturally filter out who should be in your life and who should not. I'm
Mm-hmm.
kind of just at this point, and I don't know, maybe it's because I'm 35 now, and they say for those of us with like ADHD, our frontal lobe doesn't develop fully until we're 35. It's a little bit
Mm,
later for us, which I had no
mm-hmm.
idea, but it makes sense.
Yeah.
Now that I'm at this age, I can't tolerate it anymore. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm showing up fully as myself. You either like it or you don't. And if you don't, I really don't care.
Yeah. And fair play to you. If I'm not your cup of tea, that's fine. I'm somebody else's tea party, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. And finding those spaces, not just the people, but the spaces where you can feel safe and feel accepted and unmask in whatever way that is. I don't think that there's a recipe for how to unmask because it's different for
It's just
everybody.
being yourself. That's
Yeah.
literally what unmasking is just
Mm-hmm.
being yourself. Like, who are you when you're home and no one else is there? That's who
Yeah.
you are. And that's who you should show
Oh,
up as.
oh, there's a lot of show tune singing and dancing that happens here when I'm by myself. So maybe should I be coming down there to Broadway? What do you
Yeah,
think?
why not?
Oh, my dialect just slipped out. Did you hear that?
Yeah.
See, I unmasked. You got me to unmask a little bit.
Good. I'm glad. That's what I want everyone to do when they speak to me. No need to
Yeah,
ever put on a performance for me.
that's right. And I think that's such a an honor
Hmm.
to know that they feel comfortable around you.
Yeah. Yeah.
I have a question about music for you, and I know that you are musically gifted on top of all of your other gifts. So I'm going
Hmm.
to ask you for the Finding Avalon Season 1 playlist. Do you have a song or two that you really enjoy that speaks to your thoughts and feelings around neurodivergence or even life in general? Do you have any recommendations, and can you let me know why they resonate with you?
I would actually I would pick my songs.
Yes.
I would. So I have a song that I released 4 years ago called Soul Searching. And that song, mind you, this was before I even came into the knowledge of my neurodivergence. This was kind of when I was like first going through my spiritual awakening. So it still resonates. But basically, the song talks about just returning to who you are, not following society telling you what you need to do. Um, return to who you were as a child. Like, who are you? What is your soul? Like, just soul searching. Um, you weren't meant to fit in, you were meant to stand out. And that's essentially the message of the song. Another song that I also released that year is called In Control. And it's a reggae song, but that song also speaks on being yourself. It speaks on having control of your life, not caring about what other people think about you. You're the one that's in control of your life. People are going to say whatever they want, and you just got to stand firm in who you are. Like, yeah, I'm that bitch. Like, that's
Mhm.
it.
Yeah.
Like,
It sounds like a neurodivergent unmasking anthem.
yeah, it is. And I
Mhm.
am really excited because I do have some new stuff that I'm working on, although I haven't I haven't shared it with anyone. So,
Okay.
but it's some new music will be out soon, and it's definitely more aligned with spirituality and just like just being yourself. And I think my neurospicy community is going to really, really, really love the next project. And I can't give too many details away
Okay.
because it's like top secret, but I definitely have my neurospicy friends in mind for the next project. So I'm really excited for that.
Okay, well, I won't I won't grill you, but I can tell you you're certainly good at the intrigue now. I'm going to be waiting and watching to find out what form that project is going to take. So I'll be watching from the east coast of Canada while you're there on the east coast of the US.
Yes.
Geneva, in 3 words, whether that's 3 individual words or
Hmm.
a 3 word phrase, maybe, what does disability inclusion mean to you and why?
So the first word I would say is access, creating environments where neurodivergent and disabled people, where we don't have to fight for basic accommodations. You know, we should be included from the start. I think because with neurodivergence, people can't necessarily see the disability. The accommodations aren't there for us because they look at you and they're like, oh, well, you look fine. You sound fine. Ain't
Mhm.
nothing wrong with you. You know, so I
Mhm.
think we need more access. We shouldn't have to fight for basic accommodations.
Mhm.
Um, Another word uh, I would say is authenticity, allowing people to show up as their full, unmasked selves without the fear of judgment and without the fear of being excluded. And belonging, you know, belonging is the ultimate goal where we aren't just tolerated or just accommodated, but like truly valued for who we are, truly valued for our gifts, and just embracing who we've always been. You know, disability inclusion, it shouldn't just be about meeting a legal requirement. I feel like it should be about shifting the way we think about humanity as a whole. We're all different. Everyone deserves to exist in a world that sees them, that supports them, and that values their contributions.
That's wonderfully said. I'm nodding my head. Listeners can't see it, but I'm like a bobblehead over here, nodding my head so hard that maybe it's almost like head banging without the music. But you put that in a very clear but very powerful way.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you. So, as we wrap up, is there anything that you'd like to share, something that you're excited about that you haven't shared with us?
If there's anything that I could say before we get off is I just want everyone to feel comfortable just being yourself. That is it. You know, be yourself. Forget what people think. Who cares? Who cares? Create a life that's easy for you. Yes, the society has their rules. It doesn't necessarily mean those are rules that we have to follow. Make your life easy. Don't drive yourself to the point of burnout and depression, trying to keep up in a world that's essentially not even made for us. You know, and I think a lot of neurodivergent people are afraid to unmask and are afraid to be themselves because of the judgment and because they fear what other people think. But I promise you, when you are authentic and you put that energy out there, showing up as yourself fully, the right people will be attracted to you and you'll find your tribe.
I think that is fantastic wisdom to end this episode with. As your Canadian neighbor, I appreciate you as a community member as well.
Thank you.
And I'm super glad that the stars aligned for me to find you when I did on TikTok back months ago. And I said, wait a minute. It was almost like screeching tires. What? Who is this? because she's speaking truth right into my soul
Aw.
in the most approachable, straightforward, plain language, accessible way, and I feel what she is saying. I identify with it. It resonates with me. And then after a little while, I thought, I wonder, should I reach out to Geneva and see if she might want to be part of the podcast?
Well, I'm glad you did. And here
I'm
we are.
here we are. Here we are. Absolutely. I'm so happy to get to amplify your story and the work that you're doing. You're bringing a lot of people peace and mindfulness during such chaotic times. And
Mhm.
I cannot tell you enough how much that is appreciated.
Aw, thank you.
Thanks so much, everybody, for listening and supporting a disabled creator and helping me amplify authentic stories and experiences like these. A simple but powerful action that you can take as an ally is to help us keep the momentum going by following me, liking, sharing, and rating the show, and even leaving a comment. You can also follow me over on Instagram at Avalon Advocacy or at avalonadvocacy.com. Special artist thanks and credit for the unreleased feature song Coal Miner, written by Steve Hoskins, arranged by Naomi Kafka, and performed by Naomi Kafka, Bryn Porter, and Tony Kostelik. Until next time, thank you so much.